Hello, my name is Luciana Haill, and I'm an artist exploring nostalgia, consciousness, and heritage using augmented reality and other digital art forms. And today I'm going to explain about the Pioneer, a sea voyage on wheels. So this train really did run through the sea in Brighton between 1896 and 1901. The locals affectionately named it the Daddy Longlegs. And it also was sort of referred to as a part yacht, part tram, part pier, part train, and part Martian fighting machine. At the same time, in 1896, H.G. Wells released his first edition of The War of the Worlds, and the artist Warwick Goebel here expressed this very similar looking craft, which was also carried through in the 1906 illustration by Henrique Alvim Correia. They are very eerie, they are very imaginative, they're very exciting, and they're thoroughly of the late Victorian era, and they share the aesthetic of the Daddy Longlegs. So I wanted to use augmented reality. I knew it was very popular, I knew it was very easy to use, maybe not so easy to make. If you haven't already tried it, maybe for trying on spectacles or furniture in the piece of your own home using a 3D model and the smartphone with a camera. Pokemon Go was the most widespread example of this, and it's had over 1 billion free downloads. It's a global gaming sensation. It was designed to encourage children to notice the world around them more. It also became a bit addictive. Maybe they didn't notice traffic and other areas where there should have been a caution. It's a little bit dangerous. But using the GPS in your phone, which is the mapping technology, and the camera, it allowed you to see this extra layer of Pokemons, and you could pick them up, collect them, and train them. So as an artist, I was really interested in how I could implement that, but without the kind of gaming and dangerous part. So I decided to use vintage-looking postcards and make them into sort of time travel portals. And here are two of my previous works from 2018. They're called Apparitions. You can see more about them and play with them using the website below. And they are my way of exploring lost heritage from where I've lived for 10 years, St Leonard's and Hastings. So there was a clock tower in the middle of town, demolished in 1973, but it lived for 111 years, and St Leonard's Pier, which was designed also by the inventor of the carriage for the Daddy Longlegs. And I wanted to be able to experience them as a tourist, but also, in a way where you could revisit them. So my method was to employ the AR, and here's the first crowd I attracted, thanks to Brighton Digital Festival helping invite and sponsor me. And about 60 people turned up, and they're all using their phones or sharing with someone else. And I'm in the middle explaining to them we're about to go on this walk through Brighton Marina, exactly on the original path that the Daddy Longlegs took. This marina's only been there since the 1980s. So the Daddy Longlegs came up behind us, it overtook us, it went down the Strand, then it left the marina and it headed out on its 3-mile journey out to Rottingdean, which is its destination. Here somebody has managed to catch it, just like a Pokemon. He's using the app, and the geotagged facility means by pointing the phone at the right part of the sea, you can see Daddy Longlegs or no longer present tracks. But there are some remnants, and I'll show you photos soon of the scars of the tracks. So it comes up into scale, and it nonchalantly travels past you, and it eerily goes along its original journey like in a haunting. So here's a photo from 1897 of some of the passengers on some of the 2 decks. It could hold up to 150 people at a maximum. In the summer, they would actually use a sun awning on that upper deck. Otherwise, lots of people had their parasols open. When it opened in 1896, it cost £30,000 originally, and that was for the track and the carriage. But it only ran for 2 weeks because a terrible storm. There was some warning, but it hit on the 5th of December. And some of the original chain pier from Brighton smashed up and washed down to where the Daddy Longlegs was tied up at a jetty overnight. And there was literally nothing left. The booking office, the whole carriage, smashed to pieces. There were just apparently shreds of velvet clinging on with a pathetic fidelity. But what we can see about this train, when it is running, it's got safety measures, it's got life buoys, it's got a lifeboat on the back tied up, it's got a ship's bell, and it was operated by a qualified ship's captain, as it's a legal seafaring vehicle, even though it's running on rails. So it had its safety features, and it got off to a bit of a shaky start due to a storm. When it did run, it could run at a maximum speed of 8 miles per hour. Now this is the inventor, Magnus Volk. He is credited with many great local engineering feats, which obviously became national. He first implemented electricity into the Royal Pavilion of Brighton, and then that went across the city, telephony and emergency warning systems. And there's a little photo at the bottom of him in his electric dog cart, which is most unusual, even if it didn't take off in a wide way. His electric railway is still present, the first permanent one in Britain, and you can travel on that, I think, between sort of Easter and October. And of course, the one I'm telling you about is the Brighton and Rottingdean Seashore Electric Railway. So here's the Pioneer, departing Banjo Groyne. It weighed 45 tonnes. It travelled 3 miles between Brighton and Rottingdean. Some days that could take 35 minutes either way, or it could take up to 2 hours depending on winds and how high the tide was and the sort of weight of the amount of shingle and stones weighing down on its wheels, which are encased inside those bogies which are running on the rails. So it had some adverse conditions to struggle with. People are boarding on the jetty, as you can see here. They're on Banjo Groyne, which is the concrete sea defence wall, and they're probably just there to look because it was such a spectacle. It drew crowds. People couldn't believe this novel train running through the sea really worked, and it was very popular. There were queues of people for it. The price of a journey was about £5. That's about 6p, and that was quite a lot. It was the same price for a dog as well, and about 3p for a bicycle. So the power for the train is actually from an overhead cable, which is not quite visible here, and it had a 100 horsepower steam engine driving a 60 kilowatt dynamo, and that was housed underneath the pier at Rottingdean. That gave it a traction voltage of 500 volts, generating electricity to the overhead cable that ultimately connected to the wheels for continual positive and return current. And the electricity never had any danger with it, any problems. Here is the same Banjo Groyne, but many years later, in 2021. You can see the Pioneer has appeared at a very higher altitude due to the height of the beach shifting a lot in those years. The stones obviously drift and they have to be replaced. But in the app, you can use an up and down arrow to make the Pioneer align correctly with either the jetty or the beach. So in this case, it needs to go down about 24 feet because that's how long its legs are. Actually, they're 26 feet. It's the 1897 model. And there is myself and the creative technologist Alex May on the beach in Rottingdean, and we're watching the Pioneer. It's an unbelievable experience seeing it travel across the sea to scale, and just absolutely stunning. So let me show you a bit more about the inside. A few weeks later, we celebrated its 125th inaugural journey, and a few more people, a few less than the original version, met on Banjo Groyne. You can now see how high the stones are compared to that Victorian photo where these people are high up on a jetty. The beach now reaches our waist. Pioneer is arriving to pick us up. You can see some of the interior, the curtains, plants and ottoman, and we're waving at it. We actually waved it off, and anyone else on the beach must have thought we were waving at absolutely nothing. Only we could see it through our smartphones, but it's free to use, so if anyone asked, we'd give them a postcard, or they could just get the app and point. It's geotagged to the beach. You don't need the postcard. So here's Magnus Volk inside with a newspaper and a friend, and you can see how sumptuous it is. Thick velvet ottoman, thick padded curtains, leaded glass around the edges, beautiful plants in the middle of the elliptical ottoman. It has carpets, has turned legs to the chairs. There's a refreshment booth in there. Here's inside my version early on. You can see Brighton through the windows because I've managed to put my point of view inside the train carriage using the kind of iPhone pinch and squeeze kind of movement. So I've zoomed in like a telescope, and now we can actually see my view as if I'm inside. It just takes a bit of getting used to. But you can see the chair has legs. We've tried to give it the upholstery. There's curtains with folds. The plants need some working on. The sunlight's coming through the window and casting that rather beautiful natural silhouette of the plants. So this is an early phase of experiencing both the journey of the train and the interior. So we used these photos. They were the only photos I could get, and thanks to the Regency Society of Brighton, I was able to share these photos in my presentations. So apparently the actual colouring was brown and beige of the couch, and this gives you a bit more detail. There are glass shades in the ceiling shaped like flowers, and the pillars really are quite decorative, much like Brighton Pavilion. Very Victorian. And here is a view of the old scars from where the train tracks ran through the rock pools. So when the tide's out you can walk onto this, but otherwise this is 250 feet out in the sea, so often it would be high tide. So this shows you the two parallel lines of the tracks. They are 18 feet apart, so that's a 2 foot 8.5 gauge size. And the train that travelled on them, so its legs, when it was rebuilt in 1897, they were 26 feet high. They had these bogies, which are the metal shoes that protect the wheels. The wheels inside were 33-inch diameter. And the carriage that is on top of it, it sits on an elliptical platform, so the outer deck is 45 feet long by 22 feet wide. The train carriage itself is 25 feet long and 12 feet wide. And that's mentioned earlier, it was designed by Richard St George Moore, the architect of Brighton's current Palace Pier and St Leonard's Pier, which was from 1891 and demolished in the 50s after some storm damage and various other incidences. So you can actually visit the palimpsests of the train tracks, stand on there, trigger the Daddy Longlegs, and it will travel across over you. It's amazing. So if you go down to Brighton Marina, you can park for free for a few hours, head out of the marina in the direction of Augmented, Rottingdean, Saltdean, and you'll see the scars of the train track from this Google map in the bottom right of the photo. Zoomed in a bit there, so you can actually see in the green area. So when the tide's out, it's very easy to walk down to that if you've got rubber soles on, and you can stand there and really get a good angle of the train. Or you can stand here, which is the sea defence wall of the Undercliff Path. And these are my guests to the first launch, and they are experiencing it out at sea and trying different angles for themselves. And here's a lovely wintry shot, a great wintry sunset, but I think my fingers were going numb, and I've triggered the Pioneer a little too high up, but the rock pools and all the ambient lighting, all the atmospherics are as they would have been, but my train is a little bit too close to the shore. So sadly it didn't last for many years. By 1901 its last journey had happened. It became very uncost effective. So although it was £5 a trip, in its second year of running after the storm damage, 44,282 people took a ride, and in the following year almost 3 times more, 112,000 people took a ride, which actually made a profit of £2,752, and it was mainly just in the months of June to September. So unfortunately it always had queues in the summer months. The last journey could be cancelled at very short notice depending on the weather, because that was the decision of the ship's captain for safety. And unfortunately, although there was some meetings about it, having a second carriage running in the opposite direction on another set of tracks, they just couldn't justify it, unfortunately, after the damage. So it looked like its days were numbered. But finally in 1901 the Brighton Corporation announced that they were extending the sea defence groins by about 200 feet further out into the sea, and they would be cutting right through the tracks of the Pioneer's route. So unless Magnus Volk could afford to run his track out and around or create a whole new one, the Daddy Longlegs no longer had a viable route. So it was stunning, it was fragile, it was ambitious, but for 5 whole years it was much loved, and even in Brighton now it's much discussed. But Magnus Volk moved on, and he was given as recompense an extension of his land seashore electric railway between Banjo Groyne and Black Rock. So he could expand his Volk's electric railway from Paston Place to Black Rock, which opened in later on in September. So he was sturdy, and he carried on with his trains. I've carried on with the train, and I've made it into a vinyl postcard record. This is a photo of a postcard size record. It's called a 5-inch player. You can actually put it on a normal record deck, and it plays a tune I created inspired by samples of voices and a kind of dub aesthetic. So it's not what you'd expect, considering it's got a Victorian kind of train as its inspiration. Here's a clip of it. It's using an injection molded technique. Here's a clip of it playing on a normal record player with an interesting stylus. And here's it playing using its own bespoke app made by the vinyl postcard people, where it plays on a virtual record player wherever you are. So you could be out and about just with your phone, and the vinyl postcard will appear magically in space and play on a 3D modelled record player. So there's a lot of detail in the 3D model of the Technics 12-turn record deck that clearly some people enjoy. This video now is myself inside the train carriage. I'm using a Kinect camera, Genimo software, and it's using like a LiDAR lens, which is lasers pulsing, which can see me, and I'll explain to you afterwards a little bit more.
What we are doing is simply taking the blessings of the past to give a sense of spaciousness for the future. At the same time, from the past to the future. To give a sense of spaciousness for the future. From the past. What we are doing is simply to give a sense of spaciousness from the past to the future.
So, in that video, I am able to appear as if I'm inside. There's like an auto green screening effect, if you know what that is, where I've obviously become a bit transparent. I quite like the effect, and in the future I hope to be able to make an installation where everyone can come and sit on a normal chair, but on the projection screen they will appear to be inside the Pioneer train, and we can take souvenirs in a new way. So you can all try the app. Hopefully it's free to download for both Android and Apple. It works on most Apple 7 Plus models, and it works on about 50% of Android, but hopefully you'll have a friend or a relative that will be able to share it with you. To trigger it, in Brighton you just head to the seafront and it will direct you towards the original train tracks, and that's using the geotagged model. But if you're not in Brighton, you need to use the image that I show in my presentation from the Regency Society, and that is the trigger. And if you don't have a real postcard yet, you can go on my website, daddylonglegs.site, S-I-T-E, and you can follow the instructions. So you could either print the picture off, or you could even use the screen as the trigger. But hopefully you can get a postcard. So here is the final slide, and I will just tell you a bit about the sound. So different to the vinyl postcard that plays, The app itself has a soundscape, and I've got the sound of like wax cylinders, which actually sound a bit like the lapping of the waves of the sea against the Pioneer. There's this sort of scratchy aesthetic. And then I've got some music hall from around the time by Billy Williams and Stanley Kirby singing about the sea. And why can't we have the sea in London, which is kind of ironic. And then I've combined and merged it with music from the same year, from 1901, the last year of Daddy Longlegs. I've used an excerpt from Enigma Variations by Edward Elgar. I've used the Nimrod section, and I feel it gives it gravitas to the amazing revenance that is the Pioneer, and hopefully my digital artwork gives it a legacy. And soon we'll get a little sign on the sea wall, and people can trigger it when they're out walking about down in Brighton. Thank you.